Good afternoon again, Newton Baseball Club coaches. We're going to go ahead and continue our discussion on mental toughness training and preparing your players to compete and play the games. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here and talk about our next topic. So last video, we talked about Newton Baseball mental toughness training, which is predicated off of a lot of it is predicated off of Justin Deemer's One Pitch Warrior and also other resources that we've gone over the last few years. Keep in mind when we talk about this One Pitch Warrior, where the phrasing comes from is it's meant to get players to focus one pitch at a time. And most importantly, be able to be on the right color spectrum. Where's it at here? Trying to find it. Sorry, guys. The right color spectrum for more pitches than our opponent. So if there's going to be somewhere around 240 pitches in a game, you want to make sure that your players are seeing green lights for the greater percentage of those 240 pitches. If we are seeing green lights for more pitches than our opponent, then there's a real strong possibility we're going to win the game. So that's kind of our little review there over being a one-pitch warrior. Today, what we're going to look at is we're going to look at how to have quality practice. We talked about what is a quality practice being. Quality practice is practice that means something. There's purpose. It is measurable. And most importantly, there's something on the line. What is on the line is up to you. Conditioning, Gatorade, dinner, etc. Be creative with what is on the line. It doesn't always have to be about running. Sometimes we let the players decide what they want to be on the line. For example, they divide up into teams and we just say, what do you want to put on it? And the guys decided. And sometimes I find that when they make that decision, it becomes way more competitive, which is a good thing. Below are just a few simple examples of creating quality practice scenarios. For most of these drills, you're going to obtain a percentage of execution, whatever percentage you choose. If your team is easily achieving the goal, then you need to increase the goal. So before I dive into this, I'm going to go ahead and go through a checklist that might be beneficial to you. Now, part of this checklist is based off of what we do at the high school level, and maybe not all of it is applicable to you. Like, for example, if you're coaching a 9-year-old team, you may not be able to use this format to coach your kids. You may spend a little bit more time on a couple things as opposed to trying to hit 9 different things. Whereas if you're coaching 14 and under, which, I would see that more or less as kind of like JV baseball or freshman baseball, you might be able to hit more of that stuff. Also, there's a lot of constraints in terms of how many kids you have at practice. There's a lot of constraints in terms of how many coaches you have there to help you. There's some other issues with regards to how much time you have. Are you outside? Are you inside? So there's a number of different things. And we'll have a session too at some point where I'll talk about all the different things that you can do inside to work with your kids. I'm really proud of the indoor practices that we have with our players because they're very focused, they're very structured, and there's a lot of productivity within the different activities that we do. But I'll say that for another time. So when you look at the two types of practices that we have skill practice, and then we'll have a competitive practice. And a skill practice is designed to teach fundamentals and really try to become a master of our skill set. We're firm believers that confidence is very much predicated off of mastery of skill. If I get better at a skill, I'm going to feel more confident when I have to perform. And then we have competitive practices that are designed to shape and mold the competitive spirit of our players. We typically like to do a 2-to-1 ratio in that we'll have two skill practices followed by a competitive practice. And a lot of times we'll sequence this in a way to where the skills that we're teaching we're going to try to assess those and reinforce what we've been teaching in a competitive practice. So, for example, if in 2 skill practices for team defense, we worked on, cuts and relays, then that means we're probably going to follow it up with a competitive scrimmage structure. Maybe we're going to play a game like point game, per se. I mean, we may play point game, because point game, you're going to get a lot of reps on your cut and relay defense. So it just kind of depends in terms of what we are trying to accomplish. But you can see here, just kind of going through each one of these little things. So every day we always start with a mental minute, and that's about 60 to 90 seconds where we're going to talk about one of 2 things. Either we're going to talk about the goal for today, or we're going to give them some type of a mental focus, like a mental cue. Like that day I may talk about ACE. What does ACE mean? Attitude, commitment, effort. Or I may talk about win, what's important now. And so we just kind of have these little daily mental minute things that kind of just focuses them in and gets them ready to, like, say, to the concept of work. Like, we're here to work right now. We go through a typical dynamic warm-up routine. We pick one strategy or one fundamental of base running every single day, and we do it for about 5 minutes, teach it, and we rep it. And we'll keep repping the same fundamental until we believe that everybody's confident in what they're doing base running wise. And then we'll do a throwing program. This could be a fundamental throwing program. It could be a pitching program. It could be a defensive situational throwing program. Either way, our throwing program is going to be something to the effect of trying to teach a skill. We're not just going to go out there and throw the ball around and, shoot the breeze. Like, it's going to be a focused practice session. One thing that we do with our throwing is we always say we are warming up to throw, meaning we're warming up our arms to start practice. Like, we're not taxing our arms in our throwing program so that now we can't use our arm the rest of practice. We're getting our arms ready to go take some more violent throws fundamentally, and also during our team defense. Fundamentals this will probably make up the bulk of our practice, is teaching and coaching fundamentals. Team defense, probably incorporating a little bit over a long period of time instead of trying to put the whole thing in all at once. So our team defense will spend probably about 5-10 minutes going over one particular aspect of some type of team defense. A special offense. This is where we'll work on different, our motion offense, different running scenarios. We'll teach this real quick. And part of that just breaks up the monotony of what we're doing. And then we'll go into very specific hitting stations. And a lot of times we'll combine special offense with hitting stations. Special offense meaning specific types of bunts, specific types of base running cues that we'll use in this special offense, and then our hitting stations. So we'll divide kids up. Half of them will go with all of my assistants and work on hitting. I would rather, like in the hitting stations, I'd rather have more coaches than not. And when I teach special offense, a lot of times I'll do that by myself because I feel like I can manage that scenario by myself. And then we have situational hitting. Which means that there's going to be some type of scenario where we're going to do a variation of situational hitting for our kids. We don't hit on the field a whole lot, in the sense that we just sit there and take batting practice and guys are out there. If we're hitting on the field, it is for a very specific situational purpose, or if we're hitting on the field, it's going to be in some type of a competitive scrimmage structure. So then you move into a competitive practice, things that are very similar, mental minute, throwing program, they're going to mirror what we do in our skill practice. But then once our arms are ready, then we're going to play. We're going to get it. We're going to get after it for about an hour and a half. And we can get after it in many different ways. And I'm going to show you what some of those ways are. So some of you are probably wondering, well, when do you throw? When do you pitch? Well, it kind of depends on your practice format. It kind of depends on your personnel. Kind of depends on the time of day, how many coaches you have. Me personally, I like to do my pitching at the end and just try to let everybody understand that practice is going to go a little bit longer because we have to throw. I know early in the spring, we kind of have to sprinkle in our pitching A lot of times during this time period, during our hitting stations, we may not do special offense for the first week or so. And that the reason for that is because the sun goes down a little earlier, and so we don't have as much daylight. So we'll try to sprinkle in our pitching and do our hitting stations at the same time. So half the guys are hitting, the other half the guys are pitching. I think at the youth program, I think when you're working with, at least 12 and under players, I think every kid should pitch. Like every kid should be working on pitching. And there's 3 different variations in terms of how we work on our pitching. And it's very similar to how we practice. We have a skills version, and then we have a competitive version in terms of how we practice. And then 2 times a week, they're going to do a bullpen session. 1 time a week, they're going to do a skill bullpen session. 1 time a week, they're going to do a competitive bullpen session. And then 2 times a week, they're going to do flat grounds, where they'll do a basic format called 5-5-5s. And I'll go into some detail on this pitching stuff. But either way, based off of what you have, the pitching practice is predicated off of how you can make it work for your practice structure. So when we talk about practicing daily measurement, the reason daily measurement is important because when we play in the games, we want our practice to be as much like the game as we can make it. Particularly those competitive practices, they need to be as close to the game as possible. So when we look at practice starts when we get it right, this is one component that we really focus on, and it's hard not to do this, particularly because you have limited time, you have limited players. And it seems like maybe you're not getting something accomplished. And I know I fall into this pitfall where I want to get through a practice plan and I want to feel like I got something done. But reality is I can get through a practice plan and the practice not be very good and feel worse about it. Whereas if things aren't going the way you want them to go, you got to stay with it. You got to stay on it. What I mean by this is we're going to keep doing this until we get it right. So if we're doing a drill, which is called 21 outs, and I tell my guys, we got to make 21 outs, like perfect. We got to do 21 outs perfectly. No miscues, no errors. You got to get 21 outs in a row. Then we need to stay out there and do that until we get it right. Now this does not mean telling one of my assistants to flip on the lights and say we're going to be out here till 10 o'clock at night until we get it. If this was college, I'd probably do something like that. But it's high school, and we're not going to be able to get. I just think there's other boundaries that we have to respect. But what you do is if you do the drill 21 outs, you don't do it for 15 minutes and then say, all right, guys, we didn't make it. Well, let's move on to the next thing. You hold your guys to a standard and say, no, we're going to do it until we get it right. And if practice is over and you still haven't gotten it right, then you look at your kids and you say, all right, we got practice 2 days from now or a day from now. We're going to warm up, and this is what we're going to start with. We're going to do 21 outs again, and we're going to get it right. And I think part of the reason why you do that is because it helps train mental toughness. It helps them deal with adversity. Augie Garrido, one of the greatest college baseball coaches of all time, his definition of mental toughness was doing the things that you don't like doing and then doing them well. And guys don't like doing 21 outs sometimes. Guys don't like playing a game called 3-ball, or they don't like doing certain things. But I always tell the guys, it's like, we're making an investment on future success here. If it's cold outside, practice when it's cold outside. You don't have to practice long, but at least you got to get them out there. The idea is if you were going to have a game on that day, then you need to go outside and you need to play. You need to do something. So let's dive into the different things that you can do to help create a quality practice. Now, a lot of these things, as far as quality practice, they will fit into typically your team defense time frame or even your competitive practice. If you look at situational QABs, this is going to happen during our situational BP, and I can go into further detail in terms of where you fit these in. But what you do is you divide your team into groups. And in those groups, they're either going to be hitting, or they're going to be on defense, or they'll be running. And what happens is that you will have a runner at first base, and then you'll have a batter who is hitting. And let's say in this particular scenario, you want the runner to sack the guy over to first base. Well, they get it's say like a 2-1 count. They get a 2-1 count to try to sack the guy from first to second. If they execute, great. If they don't execute, then that counts against them. And so typically we try to keep about 4 scenarios or 4 situations. So basically your hitters are going to get 4 at-bats, but your defense is going to get, for every one of these are live. They're going to get this live situation every single time. And so you get to, one, create, I mean, even though it's not a lot of reps, you get to create intensity, you get to create focus, and then you're sitting there, you're going to chart the percentage, their execution percentage. And you may start out with 60%, like your team or your hitting group needs to execute 60% of the time. And then when they get to the point where they can execute 60% of the time, then bump it up to 65% of the time. And if they can execute 65% of the time, then bump it up to 70% of the time. And what you're doing is as they're reaching those numbers, what you're creating achievers. That's part of the problem is like kids don't understand what achievement is. And so when you set goals in practice, then you create a little bit of achievement with those kids. And so then once they become achievers, well, then they start to crave achievement. And now you have some self-motivated, some self-starters is the kids that you have. So how it works is let's say you have 12 kids, you may put them into groups of 4. And basically one group of 4 is going to run and hit at the same time. So you may put 2 at first and 2 at home, and then the 2 guys hit at home, whereas the 2 guys at first, they'll run. Or you can do it this way where one kid runs and then he runs all the way around and he gets in line to hit, and the guy that hit, he runs to first and he stays at first. There's a number of different ways that you can do this if you have 12 kids at practice. For some of these practice variations, a lot of times it's really beneficial if you have more kids. Which is why I think it's a great idea for like 9 and 10-year-olds to practice together, 11 and 12-year-olds to practice together, 13 and 14-year-olds to practice together as a cohort. Because when you practice together as a cohort, like you can do a lot of these different drills or a lot of these different scenarios, and you can get a lot of production out of it. Anyway. Bump percentage. So this is kind of a fun little thing that we do at the end of practices sometimes. This is part of special offense too, is the hitters will get in a line and we'll make them, they get one bunt. They get one shot to put a bunt down in a kind of marked area that we need them to bunt the ball to. And if they execute, great. If they don't execute, all right, next guy up. And so we'll put a percentage on the team and say, you got to hit this percentage. If you hit this percentage, great. You can move on to the next thing in practice. If you don't hit this percentage, well, then you either make them do it again or you hold them accountable to that. And that's part of what this is part of what makes it competitive, is because you're putting something on it. Like if the team doesn't hit 60% in their situational BP, well, they have a triangle, or they have 25 burpees or something. Bump percentage. If they don't hit their number, well, then they have a triangle. They have some type of a consequence. Or you ask them, like, what do you feel like? What do you feel like this is worth? What should we put on it? And they may say 25 push-ups or something. But it doesn't have to be. You don't have to kill them physically, but at least they understand that like this isn't okay. Like this isn't acceptable. 50-100 drill. This is an infield drill. I really enjoy this one. We have a whole bunch of stuff that we do infield wise, but this is a really good competitive drill that we use to kind of evaluate and assess our skill level of our players. So we'll pick, kind of depends on how much time we have. We may go with 50 balls or we may go with 100 balls. And what I'll do is I'll just take those balls and I'll just randomly hit them all over the infield. And then it'll go to the first baseman. The first baseman will take that ball and then they'll either drop it in a good bucket or they'll drop it in a error bucket. And then when we're done, we'll take both of those buckets, we'll dump the good bucket and we'll dump the error bucket, and we'll look and see the difference. And we'll figure out the percentage. Somebody will use their calculator and their phone and we'll figure out what our fielding percentage is. Ideally, as a team, you want to be about 95%. Anything below 95%, and you're probably not a very good defense. You're probably about a 500 ball club. If you want to be a winning ball club, you definitely got to field at a clip higher than 95%. Pressure time. This is a really good one. I started doing this one last year. And basically what it does is I'll holler pressure time. And in that moment, that particular individual has to execute, whether it be in batting practice, like they need to get a hit, or I'll say pressure time. This person needs to make a play, needs to field the ground ball and make a play. Or if a pitcher's in the bullpen, I'll say pressure time. Like, you need to throw a strike. And I'll even phrase it that way. Like, you need to do this right now. And what I would hope that they'll mentally do to themselves is like, I don't need to do this. I need to focus on the task that allows me to do this. But either way, in this particular pressure times, we're trying to create tension and anxiety so that they can kind of refocus and go from seeing red lights or yellow lights to seeing green lights. And we'll only do this about one time at practice, but if they execute, great, we celebrate it. Like, we're jacked, we're pumped. If they don't execute, well, we have a triangle as a team. It's not an individual thing. A lot of times we make them run as a team so that everybody gets this sense that there's pressure and all of us feel the pressure. Like, one person, this is an individual sport. One person doesn't lose the game. Everybody loses the game. Plays on the clock. We use a stopwatch a lot when we're doing defense. If we're defending on cuts and relays, we'll clock or we'll time how long it takes to get the ball to third base. We'll clock in terms of how long an infielder takes to get the ball to first base or turn a double play. But it creates pressure. The stopwatch creates pressure for the infielders. 5 in a row. This is a really good one. This is one of those things where I talked about practice until it's done, or what was the phrase I used up here? Practice starts once we get it right. So on 5 in a row team defense, let's say we have to execute 5 bunt defenses correctly, perfectly in a row, or we have to execute 5 cuts and relays in a row, or we have to execute 5 first and third defenses in a row. When we do these team defenses, we'll make them do that. And if they do it right, then we'll move on. We're great. If they don't do it, then we'll keep doing it until we get 5 in a row. We don't really hold them accountable in terms of make them run between these, because the goal is to get them to do 5 in a row. The punishment or the consequence is going to be the fact that they can't move on in practice, because what we schedule typically at the end of practice is hitting, is what we typically schedule at the end of practice. And everybody loves to hit. Everybody wants to hit. So you put something at the end that they want to do and just say, we got to pay the price first, and then we get to have some fun later. Easter eggs. This is by far one of my favorite drills. What we do is I'll take a bucket out to the left field. My guys will warm up. They'll go through our throwing routine, and every ball that's lost, I'll throw a ball out to them, say keep playing catch, but leave the ball that's lost. We call that an Easter egg. And then when they're done, they go gather up all the Easter eggs. And what we try to get them to understand is that these Easter eggs, these are what we call loose balls. And these loose balls, they're free bases is what they are. Not playing catch, not catching a baseball, not blocking it, not knocking it down. That's a free base. So anytime there's a ball that's not protected, that's runners that are moving up bases. And so if we have 5 Easter eggs, well, then we'll make the kids go run 5 extra. We'll go right to the base paths, and we're going to run 5 bases. We're going to get that consequence immediately. Like, you got to understand, we need to get those bases back. 21 outs. I talked a little bit about 21 outs. You can do this in any type of variation. You can read through that and have questions for me when we talk about it. Pitchers 10. These are some competitive bullpens that we do. Pitchers 10, first to 10. Pitchers 10, hit the spot. Pitchers 10, pitch type. I don't want to go into too much detail here because I can describe these when we get together in our meeting, or you can email me if you have any questions regarding specifically how to do a pitcher's 10 sequence. I think it's pretty self-explanatory here in the writing. Hustle game. What is our purpose of hustle game? Yet again, these are some of our competitive things right here, whether it be 21 outs or whether it be pitcher's 10s. Easter eggs. We do Easter eggs every day. That's non-negotiable. We're going to do Easter eggs every single day. Hustle game is going to be a part of a competitive practice. Point game is a part of a competitive practice. Infield scrimmage, Palomino, and T-ball. These are all competitive practice games that you can play. I like hustle game just because it teaches kids to play with tempo. In 30 minutes, typically we'll do hustle game at the end of practice on a competitive day, and we'll show kids that they can play a baseball game in probably about 35 minutes. We can play 7 innings in about 35 minutes if they're hustling and moving on. And we use the 7-13 approach, which means infielders, you have 7 seconds to get on and off the field, and outfielders, you have 13 seconds to get on and off the field. It's a really fun game. And yet again, when we do this hustle game, we're getting our conditioning. We should be getting our conditioning. If we're playing hard, like, the conditioning should be taking care of itself. Point game, very similar to hustle game in many ways. The only difference is that when you're in your group, you're going to stay and hit until you're through all the situations that your coach may want you to hit through. So for example, we may play point game for 4 rounds. And that means that one hitting group is going to hit 4 different rounds. And those rounds will be runner at first, runner at second, runner at third, or maybe 2 runners at first, 2 with the runner at first and 2 with the runner at second. It doesn't really matter what we do, but whatever situation we want to work on, we're going to keep doing that situation over and over and over again. And what makes it a game is that when you hit the ball, the runner, it's live. Everything's live. The runner runs, or the hitter runs, and for every bag he gets, they get a point, and the base runner, for every bag he gets, the group gets a point. And each group is trying to accumulate as many bags as possible, and your defense is trying to keep them from taking bags. So the things that I like about it is that, one, it helps with tempo. It gets your base runners running more aggressively, but it creates a tremendous amount of situations for your team defense to try to get outs. Another version of point game is one that we call Palomino. And the difference here is that in Palomino is that if the ball is hit safely to the outfield, no matter what, base runner and hitter, they have to go 2 bases. You have to run 2 bases no matter what. If the ball's not hit cleanly into the outfield, then they don't have to go 2 bases. So we usually call it point game Palomino, or Palomino point game. Infield scrimmage, this one's pretty hard. This is a hard one and can be frustrating for players, particularly because a player sits there and really squares a ball up, but that's just a foul ball. And when we say square a ball, it's like they may hit a ball to the gap. What we want our players to do is ideally, the perfect hit would be for them to one-hop the dirt and the ball goes to the outfield. So we want our players to hit either a ground ball, or we want them to one-hop the dirt to the outfield. If they hit a fly ball, it's live in the sense that you can get out, but nobody can advance on a fly ball. If it is a ball that's driven to the fence or driven to the gap, and it's higher than one-hopping the dirt to the outfield, well, then it's just a foul ball. So it doesn't help you, but it doesn't hurt you. So ideally, this is a game designed to, 1, get players to focus more on hitting line drives, but 2, to get players to get a lot of work for your infield on a lot of really competitive, hard hit balls. T-ball game, we don't do that one too much. I did this one more when I coached JV. And it's okay. I mean, it can be a fun little game, particularly because sometimes in JV we only had like 8 or 9 guys. So I wanted to try to create a competitive situation or a competitive game for them, particularly day before we played. So anyway, so these are all of the different scenarios that you can use in your practice plan, and you can fit them however you want to squeeze them in to your competitive practices or your skill version practices. So I hope this was helpful. I look forward to meeting with you guys to talk about some of these things, or to go into a little bit more further detail and to ask you questions regarding this particular information, or answer questions that you may have regarding these particular skills and fundamentals. And thank you so much for taking the time. You guys have a great day. Looking forward to talking to you.